Hello and welcome to Wayports Racing League Season 3, Round 4, Aston Cadet GP. This is Division 1 of Wayports. I'm Peter Butcher, and this week I'm joined in the commentary box by Travis Mellinger. Travis, I've had a couple of weeks out from the series, so maybe you can bring us up to speed with what's been going on in Division 1 of WRL Season 3.
I can. So last week we were at Fern Bay. It was a pretty eventful race. Obviously, Fern Bay Green, a few hazards around the racetrack, all pretty close to the racetrack. So we had cars going over the curbs, we had cars in the tires, we had cars up on their sides coming around through the final corner to take the checkered flag. Though Mariano was able to recover. Of course, I'm talking about him. Was able to recover and reset and seal his victory. Though he had a heart-stopping moment there at the end. Fairly close racing all the way through. A lot of fun to watch. Hopefully we'll have more of the same today.
Thank you very much for that. Today we're on round number 4 of the championship, Aston Cadet. We've been to Aston once this season already and several times over the course of the last 2 seasons of WRL. But today we return to the Cadet track, which is one that the drivers have done before. It's 1.9 kilometers, so very, very short. And we're going to get 40 laps around here at around about 2:05, with a mandatory pit stop, of course, in Wayports Racing League. The drivers are currently on the track for their qualifying session with about 7 minutes left to go, and we'll bring you pictures of that in just a second's time. Just a reminder to all of you that the car the drivers are using is the XF GTI and Live the Speed, one of the demo cars free to play. 1.3 litre inline-4 front engine, front-wheel drive, 115 brake horsepower, and just under a ton. Those are the headlines, Travis. And around Aston Cadet, it's a mighty fun car.
It is. It is a really fun car. This is a really fun track. It's kind of like a big go-kart track, but I would say a few undulations not common to go-kart tracks. We're watching Wellington come through here. He's going to come through the part of the racetrack that people affectionately call Eau Rouge, though it's somewhat different than the namesake corner in Belgium. Coming around the final corner here, there's a dangerous curb on the inside. It's especially dangerous in these kind of cars. He stays well clear of it so he doesn't flip the car up onto 2 wheels. As I was saying, kind of like a go-kart track. Pretty short, fairly slow corners, some long-ish straights. We'll call this a straight even though he's coming around a left-hand bend here. Get up pretty good speed and then hard on the brakes and a hairpin. It's a good circuit. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I like it too, and especially in the slower cars. In the XFG, it's good fun. As we've got Alex from Step Up in the Gravel at turn 1, a new entry to the championship last round. And speaking of last round, let's take a look at what last round did to the Drivers' Championship, Travis. It had a bit of an effect, I think it's safe to say.
Yes, it did indeed. So last week, Andy was at the top of the standings. Mariano was down in 3rd. Santiago was 2nd. Obviously, sorry, I've gotten that wrong. Mariano and Andy switched positions. Santiago still there in 3rd. Don't know that it changed the order much behind. See Valentina there in 4th, Wellington in 5th, Ian, Arthur, Eduardo down to 8th, and Alex, the newcomer last week, in 9th position. Hearing in my ear that I've made a mistake, Wellington pipped 5th position there because we didn't have Ian last week.
Yeah, well, those two tied on points in 5th and 6th, and good to see Alex registering some points there down in the back of the field. But of course, he has only done 1 round, so let's see what he can manage today for the Step Up team. In the teams championship, it's still Vertex in the lead by 8 points.
Yeah, they are. Mariano definitely brought them closer in 2nd on the back of his win last week, but. Yep, as you say, Vertex still at the top. McLean Library pretty close behind in 2nd. Bank of Wayports pretty far back in 40th. Don't know that they'll be challenging for 1st or 2nd position. Then Lilium in 4th, Atrium in 5th. And Alex, the sole driver for the Step Up team, rounding out the order in 6th position.
Yeah, back to qualifying today, and it is Andy who leads the way with a 1 minute 5.15. Only half a tenth ahead of Mariano. His big rival. But these two at the front, they're running a passenger just to try and bring them a little bit closer to the rest of the field. So far, not having that much of an effect, Travis. Still half a second void to Santiago.
Yeah, and I don't know how much the weight would make a difference around this circuit. For those who don't know or don't recall from the past event, each of those passengers is 70 kilograms of ballast. Not a trivial amount of weight in the car, in the passenger seat. But the track is mostly left turns, and it's mostly slow corners. So It's going to have some effect on the performance of the car through a corner like this one. We're on board with Andy. Really good shot here. We could see the passenger's helmet there on the right. I don't know that it'll have too much of an effect, and we can kind of see that in the gap to Santiago. He's 6/10ths back, though. Andy and Mariano. Andy actually just closed up a little bit to 300ths behind Mariano. Won't make much of a difference. Coming through this left-hand corner now. He wants to stay off the grass. Yeah. We'll see if it makes a difference during the race, because the car behaves somewhat differently with that much ballast, even though it doesn't affect the performance that much. It may, because it'll certainly wear the tires more, and competitors behind won't have to deal with that. The car goes off and then rejoins straight across Andy there. Looks like he's pumped the brakes and is now going to trail the the driver who's come across the course. That's Wellington, who was off and back on and then in front of him again.
Yeah, and still there indeed, as Andy just decides to get through at turn 1, goes a bit deep, and there's a bit of contact, and Andy's off. Yeah, we just saw Andy take a pretty normal line, it has to be said, through turn 1. Sorry, through the final turn. But because he went quite wide, he ended up losing a ton of time up the hill. Because of the just what happens on that corner. If you go wide onto the grass, it's uphill, and if you're not on the tarmac, there's no grip. So that's what ruined that lap time. Mariano currently ahead by 0.03 of a second, and he's in the pit lane, so I don't know if he's going to go out again.
Yeah, that final corner is pretty deceptive. Maybe Ian will be coming around in just a minute. Maybe we can follow him on board and see what it looks like from the driver's view. So you come through, hey, there we go, excellent shot. So we're going to come, over this crest with Ian and through this really fast chicane, and then it's uphill over this crest coming toward this final corner, and then it's going to go downhill slightly and then flatten out like right as the car loads up, and then there's this dip in the middle of the corner. So you can brake deceptively late. It's downhill, but then it flattens out, so you get some of the compression of the car as the contour of the road changes, you're helping the braking. But then there's the dip in the middle of the corner, and then it's a little bit off camber and then uphill on the exit. So you can brake fairly late, but then you have to kind of tiptoe around the corner and make sure you avoid the curb on the inside. It's really tempting to take that big curb on the inside because it looks flatter than it is, and if you touch it, you flip the car up on 2 tires. So the guys who are really quick at the very top, Mariano and Andy, they'll have figured out the final corner and be able to carry a lot of speed through there. And the drivers who have not, they'll lose an awful lot of time there because that corner matters. Besides the fact that it's just kind of a tricky corner where it's hard to find the speed, it also leads onto the longest straight on the circuit. So the drivers who get that right will be quick, and the drivers who don't will fall pretty far behind.
Yeah, that's a very good point. The final corner at Aston Cadet is super important as we see Arthur going through turn 1. Currently P6, just ahead of Alex. And today with a 40-lap race, that final corner is going to become a problem, I think, for the front two, especially with that extra weight at the front of the car, dragging that car through that corner, up the hill. It's going to put an awful lot of load through the front tyres. So an added challenge for the front 2 runners. Not sure whether Santiago will throw in an extra passenger as well, but he seems to be having his work cut out by Ian, who is only just around 0.4 behind. As we see Arthur for Atrium coming through to the final corner, let's see how he manages. This will be his final timed lap of the session. Nice apex, but you can see the front right tire there was on pretty much full lock going through there, and that is going to prove difficult in the race. Lots of smoky tires we're going to see there if he continues to do it. No improvement. Oh, actually, no, he did improve on that final lap, but not enough to get past Wellington, who's also in the pit lane. So, yeah, Wellington will take 5th in the session. Mariano's coming in the pits, so probably just doing a practice pit stop. Ian, the final
and Andy was parked was coming into pit lane as the clock was running down, so we won't see another time from him. He's 300ths back. Mariano won't improve on that. Mariano just came into the pits. This is how qualifying will conclude. I think this is our order.
Yeah, let's see. Ian does not improve across the line, and that is indeed our qualifying. 7 cars for the 4th round of the championship, and here's how they'll line up on the grid. It will be Mariano by 0.03 of a second ahead of Andy on the front row, followed by Santiago for Vertex. Then it's Ian for Lilium, Wellington for Bank of Wayports, Arthur for Atrium, and Alex for Step Up in 7th and last place in that session. So, yes, Travis, we always talk about this. The run down to the first corner proved pretty tricky for some of the drivers in previous rounds and previous seasons, but it's quite important at tracks where you have a hairpin at the first corner. Where do you want to be on the road as you head down towards Turn 1 at Aston Cadet?
I'm not sure here. I think I'd want to be on the inside, but there's also the second hairpin that follows the first one. So if you can carry speed on the outside, stay alongside your competitor going into the next corner. You can ride the curb in the second hairpin and cut it fairly closely, but then there's another left-hander after that coming around the Eau Rouge part of the circuit. So. If you're good, you can kind of hang around on the outside and maybe find your way through on the back part of the circuit. I think I would still rather be on the inside for this first corner. Carry speed through there as quickly as possible, get it done, and then get away in the lead. That's how I would prefer to do it.
Yeah, you have an interesting set of hairpins at the beginning of this lap, so it doesn't really matter where you are. But yeah, I'd also want to be on the inside. The drivers on the grid. Let's see what happens and where drivers choose to position themselves for the start of this one. Take it away, Travis.
Lights are coming on and going off now. We've got Mariano off in the lead. The two Vertex cars going to line up right behind him, though that's Andy going to have a look down the inside pretty tight on the white line. He's doing what I would have wanted to do, though he doesn't quite have the overlap. Now he's through. Mariano on the brakes pretty early, but it looks like Andy went a little bit deep. Mariano going to do the crossover. Andy's still going to have the inside line on into the next corner. Stuck on the outside, now has the inside. He's going to go awfully deep here. Can he make it stick? He cannot. Mariano going to stick to him on the outside. The two of them come together. There was a car off behind them. These two come together. That's Santiago into the barriers from third position. Mariano and Andy touch coming out of turn 3, but now running line astern around this corner. Mariano a little bit wide, has to dab the brakes coming out of the outside of the corner to avoid running off in the grass. Manages to pick up the throttle and the speed. Going to drive a little conservatively through the downhill here, uses a lot of the curb. Andy takes a lot more grass behind him. Behind these two, Ian in 4th place, trailing one of the Bank of Wellington car, the Bank of Wayports cars. Another car off behind, couldn't see who that was. Looks like there's Arthur back there and also Alex. A little bit of excitement for these drivers as, oh my goodness, Alex all out of sorts on the left side of the circuit in the grass there, nearly takes out Arthur coming into the final corner. All the cars through, we'll say, more or less safely on the first lap. Now we're back with Mariano in the lead by about 1.5 seconds, nearly 2 seconds. Andy sets off in pursuit, the three of them pretty far ahead of Ian in 3rd place. Pete, that was an exciting start.
It was, especially down at the back, but the two front runners side by side pretty much in the entire first sector of the lap. But it is Mariano who leads currently by around about 2 seconds. I don't know. It's Andy has to preserve his tyres this race. That has to be his prime. He has to. Otherwise, Mariano is just going to run away with this race. In the background, obviously, Ian up to 3rd. We saw Santiago spearing off into the wall at the beginning of the race, just out of the first chicane. He is catching up to Wellington, though, as we go down through Eau Rouge.
He is pretty close behind. He's got a good look to the
Ian's off.
The final corner. He's too far behind. Yeah, to Ian. That's Ian off behind them. Looks like Santiago's going to touch that curb. That's dangerous. He just got over the white line. He didn't get on the really meaty part of the curb. He'll have a good run behind Wellington coming into the first corner. He's going to look to the inside here, down to the white line. This would be a pretty late send if he does it, but he certainly could. Looks like he will stay behind. This is a really good shot. We can see him drive right over this curb. Really beautiful line through this corner. He's got that figured out. Though Wellington ahead of him gets it a little bit wrong coming out of the first corner. Santiago checks up to avoid hitting him instead of pouncing on the gap in the right side of the road there. And we'll follow him through around the back part of the circuit. Pete, one of the things that we didn't have a chance to talk about before the race started, there are big championship implications today because both of the Vertex drivers are competing and are near the front of the order. They're in 2nd and 4th. Only one McLean Library driver today. We are missing Valentina. It is Mariano, the sole representative of the McLean Library team today.
Yeah, that's the first time I've not seen Valentina lining up in the grid, so I hope she can join us for the next round because, like you said, yeah, if those two Vertex cars finish, then that is bad for their championship. Well, bad for McLean Library's championship, as we see Wellington having to go defensive out of the final corner. Santiago is through and past now, and Ian is just lingering in the background. Gap at the front is around about a second, so those two still pretty close, but we're going to keep watching this midfield battle, Travis.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on the two of them. This is now a three-way battle here at the front as Ian has a look to the outside there, thought better of it. He'll have a great, he would have a good run out of the corner here, but had to check up with Wellington coming across the racetrack. It looks like Andy and sorry, not Andy. It looks like Ian and Wellington are struggling coming out of these corners. They really, because it's a front-wheel drive car, they really want to get the power down to kind of drag the car out of the corner. And if you check up on the brakes, or if you don't get enough of if you don't time getting the power down to drive out of the corner, it's easy for the rear of the car to kind of move around. And it looks like that's what they're struggling with right now. I think it'll get better as they get more heat in the tires. You can see where the weight transfers and the road falls away from Ian there, and Wellington. It's just happened to Wellington too, where the road falls away, the grip at the back of the car really comes off. So I think these guys need to settle in, slow down a little bit, get some heat in the tires, get their rhythm going, and then I think the car will come to them. They won't be struggling quite so badly.
Yeah, this is something that's especially if you're new to sim racing, it's certainly difficult with corners like that because you don't have the normal feeling of being in a car. Travis, you know this well from your sim racing. A lot of it is you have to do the feeling through your hands to work out how the car is light, and that really does depend on kind of the quality of the hardware that you're using. So coming down Eau Rouge, if you have let's say a budget sim racing rig, it's a lot more difficult to feel what the car's doing. You have to rely a lot on your eyes.
Yes, and some of these drivers I think are using gamepads. Oh, as we switch to Mariano and Andy, caught by a backmarker, now running side by side. We'll follow these two into the first corner. Looks like Andy's cleared him coming through the left-hand bend here to cross the start-finish line.
Yeah.
Looks like he's got the position, though. Mariano's not going to give up.
Mariano has damage as well,
you're right,
from that backmarker.
Oh, it looks like he went pretty deep, managed to just keep it on the racing line, though Andy was able to stick it in the inside and then make it the outside of this corner. Gets just touched in the right, or the left rear by Mariano, but he's got the position. This would be a brave move by Mariano. That's not going to stop him from trying it there. I was about to say that Andy did a good job positioning his car to make Mariano think that he might come across the racetrack and cover it off. Mariano not able to make a move, and now Andy off into the lead.
Yeah, so there we go. Proving that even in a race with 7 cars, the backmarkers really can affect the racing. And yeah, as we see Andy currently in the lead through the final corner, and he's done a nice line there as well.
Yeah, he has.
That should be his to the next corner. Sorry, back to what you were saying.
Yeah, so we were talking about sim racing hardware. Some of these guys are using game pads, or I don't know if anyone's just heard in my ear from Elmo. The 3 of them are using keyboards, so you have none of the feel with a keyboard or a gamepad that you would get even in a budget wheel. So yeah, you talked about how you have to kind of feel the car through your hands, which is a little bit interesting. That's something you would, in a real car on the road, you definitely feel, the steering getting light if you're losing grip or the rear of the car is moving around on you. That's something you absolutely get in a real car. But what you don't get, where it really matters on a circuit like this one, is the feel of the weight moving around. So these guys, when they come down the hill here, we're on board with Mariano. We can see Andy just about to crest the hill here. The car will get really light, and you can feel that, in your body. You can feel that in your stomach and in your butt, in the seat, getting light in the seat, and the belt's pressing down into your shoulder. And you get none of that. You can't feel the weight moving around. So you really just, you have to learn to do it with your hands, and then you just have to know, you have to see it on the racetrack where the undulations of the road are going to affect the weight of the car moving around. And feel it out. It takes a long time. Some guys are quicker than others, but it definitely takes time and experience to deal with that loss of sensation that you would have in a real car.
Andy briefly took the fastest lap and then was stolen away by Mariano, and that gap is come back down to nothing. So these guys really are, after 7 laps, they've eked out the gap to 15 seconds to the cars behind, but there's really not a lot between them, as we see. These guys have obviously known each other for a very long time, 20 years, in fact, in the sim and things like that. So they're one and the same in sim racing, it seems, having a good time out there.
They are. Nice tight race here. Andy's line through the last sequence of corners was really good. On the first couple laps, I noticed that Mariano was fairly conservative getting the car through this sequence of corners, Eau Rouge as we call it, and the final corner here. And Andy was much more aggressive. Andy's still fairly aggressive, taking that line over the curb and into the grass at the bottom of the hill through Eau Rouge. And now Mariano doing the same. And these two, you could throw a blanket over them. Quick laps, really close together. Hopefully they can keep this up for the next 31, 32 laps as Mariano takes a dive down the inside. He's going to force Andy a little bit wide, just a little bit of contact there. And now they trade positions again. Coming up on another back marker, Pete. I think this is Alex again.
Yeah.
Alex dutifully gets out of the way.
Yep, doesn't cause any trouble this time, but Andy spun Mariano around and he's waited and he's been rear-ended by Alex, in fact. So I wonder what's happening here. I think Andy's going to give that place back. I don't think he intended to do that at all. Let's see what Andy's up to. Yeah, he's slowing down. He's probably going to let Mariano have that place back, or wait for him to catch up at least. So a little bit of drama at the front of this race, and there we go. Andy doing probably the right thing there and letting Mariano have that place back.
Yeah, I think that was a polite sporting gesture to immediately slow down to give the position back, but had forgotten there was a back marker there, so he got out. And speaking of back marker, the back marker is now safely out of the way. Got punted up the road. No, Pete.
Alex spearing into Mariano. Mariano won't be happy with that, and he's going to take a while to get out of the gravel. Andy can use this now to get going again. Santiago comes through. Vertex 1-2, and here comes Ian for Lilium. Will Mariano choose to pit? No, Alex has decided to fly down the pit lane, and Mariano is coming into pit. I wonder if he's going to take damage repair or just get his pit stop out of the way now. Lots of rear end damage on that car.
Yeah, he could just as easily reset. That was kind of a theme of last week's event, was cars ending up on their lids, which is really easy to do around Fern Bay. Excuse me. So lots of cars resetting, kind of getting the free damage repair out on circuit as Mariano sets off in anger back into the race once again. I think he'll still be frustrated by that. It looks like he took fuel only, didn't take damage repair. No respect for the pit exit line here, though I don't know that we have a rule that we have a rule in this series that enforces it. Yeah, he'll be pretty frustrated by that. Andy's nearly got a full lap lead on him now. Mariano just coming through the first couple of hairpins now and onto the back part of the circuit. Andy out of the final corner. Yeah, he'll be really frustrated by that. Alex is new to Live for Speed, I think new to sim racing, and learning the ropes. I think even so, I think Mariano's going to be pretty frustrated by that. That was, Alex fully out of control, off the circuit, and then affecting the lead of the race and then the championship fight. But still a long way to go in this race. Andy has yet to pit. Andy could experience the same vicissitudes of traveling through back markers, so it may yet be a close race at the end.
Yeah, for sure. The top three are really close again now, up down to 8 seconds because of the kerfuffle between Andy and Mariano a couple of laps ago. But Mariano's got a lot of work to do. His pace is good, but is it good enough to take 25 or so seconds out of Andy? Of course, Andy still has to make that trip down the pit lane. So really, we're looking at a gap of around 10 to 15 seconds between those two. Mariano needs to hope that he has a very clean race to the end now. He can't afford to be spearheaded by Alex again.
No, he can't. I expect he'll need a little bit of help to catch Andy. Andy needs to make a mistake or he get caught up in a back marker. But the next car up the road, Ian, as we see Arthur in the pits right now from 6th position, he will easily come out ahead of Alex. Mariano, I think, won't have too much trouble catching Ian. Recall that he and Andy in the first 3-4 laps of the race quickly built a 15-second lead. So he's got the pace to make up that gap. We will certainly see, more drivers making mistakes and having little offs here and there. But it'll be a tall order to catch Andy. Still a long way to go yet. So we'll keep an eye on it and see. Go ahead, Pete. Sorry.
Santiago, sorry, has had a relatively clean start to this race. Besides his going off on the first lap, he is only 2 seconds and catching on Andy. He currently has the fastest lap as well. So if Andy and Mariano have more struggles, don't discount Santiago from the race win here.
No, not at all. And he looks pretty good and consistent going around the racetrack. He was quick through the back part of the circuit. I think the theme of these events has been consistency. The drivers who are the most consistent and avoid, I was going to say avoid the back markers, but in general just avoid trouble, tend to do pretty well. We see a lot of kind of rubber banding at the around the order where drivers have big mistakes or big offs into the grass or into the gravel. But these kind of performances like Santiago's putting down right now, it's been a quiet race for him so far. He's driving consistent laps. He's driving consistent and quick laps. If he can keep this up, he'll probably find himself up front and maybe be able to take the top step of the podium after they cross the finish line the final time.
Yeah, if it stays like this, we'll certainly have at least a 3-way fight for the lead. Andy did put a 10th back in front of Santiago at the previous split, but let's see, a great exit there for Santiago out of the final corner. Santiago just doing a better job generally in the final sector of this lap. Not necessarily in the first sector, but in the last sector, and especially that final corner, as you saw from this onboard. Santiago making gains, and that gap has come down to under a second, almost half a second now between these two. So Santiago, if he can keep his driving consistent as he goes a bit deep at the first corner, he could be in the lead of this race and potentially taking that checkered flag in 25 or so laps time. As we head through this first chicane, once again, you can see Andy just a bit quicker through there.
Yep, he really could. That was this is an excellent picture. We got to see the shot back to Santiago coming through the final corner. I don't know how he did it, because it's hard to do in any car, but it's exceptionally hard to do in these cars. He had a beautiful 4-wheel drift coming through that final corner. You can see the car, all 4 wheels just sliding in concert to the outside of the track, and we saw that in all the speed he carried out of the final corner, how much he caught up coming into the hairpin. Looks like he's got another good exit here. He doesn't use quite as much road on the outside as Andy does, but he's still right there. Not as good an exit as he had on the last lap, but he's running consistent laps, like you said, Pete. He's doing the job. He just needs to be patient, be consistent, and wait for an opportunity.
Yeah, I've been keeping an eye on the gap between these two and Mariano, as well. And I can tell you it's going up. It's going up by about half a second a lap at the moment. So, yep, Santiago and Andy for Vertex are doing a great job so far. I think Santiago is almost willing Andy on. Andy doesn't want to be caught by his teammate, of course. So these two doing a good job out front.
And I think Santiago would certainly like to see, would like to find himself in the lead of this race. Who wouldn't? But these two, they have an opportunity to really cement the top spot of the championship standings, the team's championship standings. So if they're smart, they'll be in communication. They'll run together. They won't fight too hard. If Santiago has a go, Andy will let him through. If Andy gets away, Santiago won't push too hard. They've got a good opportunity to take really, really solid points here. As Santiago, another great run out of the final quarter. Andy looked like he made a bit of a mistake, though. Yeah, maybe Santiago thinks he's quicker and has decided, since he caught up, maybe he'll just straight line the grass there. That's the fastest way into pit lane.
It is.
Yeah, he was certainly quick enough to keep up with Andy. Maybe he thinks he wasn't quite quick enough to get through and gap him, so he chose to pit rather than follow him around. If that's the case, that's smart strategy.
Yeah, let's see where Santiago comes out in relation to the rest of the field. Mariano only just coming across start-finish now, so Santiago will be out ahead of Mariano by quite a way, actually, by, well, probably about 10 or so seconds by the time we get the timesheets of their gap. But Mariano, again, catching up to Alex. Let's hope he gets through cleanly this time, as Alex goes off into the gravel. So getting well out of the way then of Mariano.
Yep, Alex made that easy, then a reset for new hardware. I thought in the background I saw that Arthur had come out between Santiago and Mariano, but I can't find him now looking around. In any case, Andy coming up on it was Arthur was out in front of Andy, gets well out of the way. That's how you do it. If you want to get out of the road as a back marker, you find a spot like that at the end of the straightaway and just put on the brakes. Wellington in pit lane now, taking fuel. This is a pretty long stop, maybe doing repair. And now following Mariano again across the line, hearing that he was indeed, Wellington was indeed taking repairs while he was stopped in pit lane. Pete, Mariano is closing on Andy by he's just one fist over another. That gap was 10 seconds just a couple laps ago. Now it's down to 5. He is falling back from the leader like you observed on the previous lap, but he is quickly catching third position.
Yeah, Mariano's catching Ian. Down to 5 seconds now, that gap, but 27.5 seconds to the lead. So again, that gap to Andy and Santiago is going up. Santiago's done his pit stop now, and that 11-second gap between Mariano and Santiago probably at this point in the race is going to keep going up rather than down. We'll have to keep an eye on it, of course. We're only on lap 18 of 40 here at Aston Cadet. Andy yet to pit. In fact, one of the only drivers yet to pit, but he basically has full control of when he does it. He doesn't have to rush. He just needs to keep an eye on the pace of his teammates so he doesn't lose the position.
Yeah, if Santiago keeps the pace up, he could conceivably pull off the undercut. Formula One meets Wayports Racing League. He could conceivably gain a position by virtue of having pitted earlier, and managed to get clean racetrack, to drive clean laps, not run through the back markers. As we're back on board with Andy, took a very aggressive line through the chicane there. Little ginger on the brakes here. He was pretty far inside of the racing line, though he gets a nice run out of the corner. That's a really good smooth exit. Wasn't sliding the car at all like he had been on previous laps. Now looking at Santiago. Ooh, very aggressive through the bottom of there. The rear of the car nearly took off on him, but he managed to save it. Now, quite a bit later on the brakes and harder into the corner, really leaning on the front tires and driving it down to that dip at the apex. And now on board with Mariano again in pursuit of Ian. They are a line astern. Ian a little bit ragged out of the final corner. Mariano a nice line out to the curb. He will be catching him down to the hairpin here. Should be able to catch up right on his bumper by the end of this lap. And I think we will have a battle on our hands, Pete.
Yeah, we just saw the contrasting lines and approaches to the final corner between Andy, Santiago, and Mariano. Each of those doing it a little bit differently. In fact, I think it was Mariano who did the best job on that lap that we were watching them. And yeah, I think that's because there is currently a carrot on a stick dangling in front of him in the form of the Lilium car of Ian. Look how close he's managed to bring that gap down to through the chicane.
Yeah, awfully quick. And they would have caught Santiago while... Oh, Ian just touches the grass on the outside of the corner there on the brakes of this corner. That's an easy mistake to make because you want to open the corner as much as you can. That lets Mariano through, now in third place, off in pursuit of Santiago. Santiago, who will have lost a lot of time on this lap, he was very cautious negotiating back markers through the first sequence of hairpins. Now coming through the left-hand bend and across the start-finish line now, this will be an awfully slow lap, a 6:80, so he lost a second and a half on that lap from his best. More back markers getting out of the way as we watch Andy running away in the lead once again. That gap now up to 17 seconds over Santiago. Santiago has clear racetrack now, so he can put in some quick and consistent laps. But whereas before he was kind of in position to fight for P1 or maybe even come out in P1 after Andy takes his pit stop, I think that possibility has gone away by virtue of having to very carefully negotiate back markers.
Yeah, Santiago still with the fastest lap, so obviously has pace as he gets a little bit sideways into the downhill corkscrew. That was a great angle to watch that from. And this time across the line, Andy will make it halfway through the race. There he goes, 21 laps. We're on the 21st lap of this race. Santiago will get an update on his time, his gap to the leader at the start-finish line.
So we've talked about this before with front-wheel drive cars, and it was hard to see in the shot, but I'm following in the game, so I was able to hear it. When the car started to get away from him coming down the hill through the chicane, he drove the car out to the outside of the racetrack, let the car just kind of wash out there because there's plenty of road, and then he got in the throttle to move the weight of the car back to get the rear of the car under control and let the power drag the car like down the bottom of the hill and then up the racetrack again. Really smart driving by him. Seems like he's got the front wheel drive cars figured out pretty well. He's keeping the gap steady to P1, so seems like he's doing okay. He may yet have a shot at P1 as long as he keeps this up.
Yeah, we just lost the step-up car. Alex has decided to retire from the race. Wonder if he'll come back in later, but that means that the top three have less to worry about at this stage of the race. They do, however, I hope they realise that the Vertex cars. I hope they realise that they are currently opening up that gap to Mariano even more. It's now 30 seconds between Andy and Mariano, so it's been gradually going up, just eking away that gap, growing and growing each lap. And Ian is somehow at this point staying pretty close to Mariano. Although he's just taken this chance to go into pits. Yes, Travis.
Yep, had caught him up and is now in the pits. I've been following Santiago around as we watch Ian into the pits. We'll call it when he takes off again. He's taking fuel only and should be off again in a moment. Santiago is pacing Andy, running laps ever so slightly quicker. Last lap, Santiago was 2/10 quicker than Andy. Ian off once again, now in the fast lane of pit lane. He'll come across the line and around the hairpin and back into the fight. I'm watching Santiago come through Eau Rouge right now. He got a little bit wrong, but he's motivated. I think he really wants that top spot. He's not giving up. I've noticed he's really aggressive into the final corner, though he's a little too aggressive there. He went over the curb and had to catch the car and keep it from getting away from him. It's still a race. It's we're past halfway done, and that gap looks pretty daunting, but Santiago has kept it steady at about 17.5 seconds, and Andy has yet to pit. Oh, across the line. He lost 1.5 seconds on that lap. Not sure how or why. His last lap was a 6:89, so clearly he's lost a bunch of time somewhere. But Andy yet to pit, as we said. This may yet be a battle to the end of the race.
Yep, anything can happen in Wayports Racing League, and we are basically at this point waiting to see when Andy will come into the pits. He's miles clear of Mariano. It's literally just now a battle between himself and his teammate. And as the racing laps go on, we may begin to see Andy struggling with those front tyres. No such problems just yet. He's coming up against Arthur from Atrium, but Arthur has been really good at letting the leaders through. No problems there so far. But yeah, Andy's doing everything he needs to do right now. Has this race very comfortably in his grasp. He's gapping his teammate. He's gapping his championship rival. It's all things are coming up Andy.
Yeah, they really are. One thing he cannot do, thinking about his potential pit strategy, is he cannot pull a cheeky move to pit on his final lap because the start-finish line is actually before the pit entry line. So he would be, I don't know what the penalty is in the Wayports rules, but he would certainly be assessed a penalty for trying to pit on the final lap because he would cross the finish line before he got into a pit box. So he could save this pit stop pretty late. He's got a healthy gap. As long as he's consistent, he can keep driving like this. If he doesn't have any trouble with the tires, then obviously there's not much reason for him to stop and cool them off a little bit. But I think the risk, Pete, is that if he keeps going like this and he has some kind of issue and he doesn't leave enough laps at the end of the race to recover, then that could harm him, put him back into second place. If he makes some kind of mistake and then has to pit and then doesn't have the time to recover.
Yeah, and Andy's never made that mistake before. It would be a little bit unlucky if he lost count of the laps, should we say. Yeah, I don't see it happening, but of course it's always a possibility. You're at the front of the race, you're enjoying it. You have to keep an eye on the laps remaining so that you know when to come in. Of course, you can't pit on the last lap of a race. You'll be disqualified. As we watch Mariano coming down to turn 1. And yeah, that gap is still going up. Another half-second gap to Andy appears. So Andy is doing a very nice job just now.
He really is. I think the theme of earlier races has been a bit of inconsistency and kind of untimely mistakes. But today, the two at the front, Andy, Santiago, running a really strong race. No mistakes, really clean, really consistent. I don't see why this wouldn't continue unless they have another encounter with back markers like Mariano did that put him back into P4 earlier, now back up to P3. The Vertex cars are in the catbird seat for a really strong finish here.
Yeah, and don't forget about the battle between Ian and Mariano. Ian's been all right. It's not been too wayward in these last few laps. The gap is around about 20 seconds, so if he does pit now, Mariano, well, he doesn't need to. Mariano's already pitted, so Ian was, Ian's kind of in a safe P4 at the moment. There is very little chance of him getting in amongst the podium unless something happens at the front. So Ian, after that pit stop, has secured himself P4, which is good. Consistent finishes always pay dividends in Wayports. As Andy is now pitting. Here he comes into the pit lane. A lot less of an aggressive entry like we saw from Santiago. Let's watch this pit stop through. He finds a box. He decides he didn't stop early enough. Does eventually find a box. And fuel only. And there we are. He's off. Very quick stop. Let's see where he comes out in relation to Santiago. He put less fuel in, importantly, than his two rivals. And it looks like it's going to be really close between these two. And, well, Andy's safely out ahead for now. But, maybe with less of a comfort gap than he maybe thought he'd have.
Yeah, that little stutter into the pit box cost him a much healthier gap. Now Santiago is going to be right there in his mirror. Santiago has been as quick as Andy. Theme here has been consistency. So if Santiago can keep it up, he can pressure his teammate. But again, if they're smart, they won't fight this too hard. I'm sure Santiago would like the win. Andy certainly wouldn't begrudge his teammate the win, but they don't want to throw this away collecting one another. That would be unfortunate and very embarrassing for the two of them. They have a very strong finish and big championship implications riding on their the current order.
Yeah, we saw Santiago again nailing the final corner. He's really strong there. He just needs to sort out the first part of the lap, and now he's in the slipstream of Andy. So this is the best time for Santiago to learn how to do this first sector, as he goes incredibly late on the brakes, spooks Andy, and Andy has just been done by his teammate.
It wasn't entirely clear what happened there. I don't know if Andy went way too deep on the brakes and Santiago was able to pounce, or it looked a little bit like Andy led him through, but I don't know why Andy would do that. I guess we can ask them after the race to see what happened there. But the order changes. Andy, so we talked about this just a minute ago, like they don't want to fight each other too hard, and Andy, for whatever reason, Santiago had a run at first position, and Andy did not fight it at all, staying well clear of each other, keeping their championship, preserving the championship points that they have on the board right now. And Andy will just follow him around now.
Yeah, that was very, very strange. It did look like Andy had almost just given Santiago the place, and that's going to prove costly for his championship if it finishes like this. Luckily for these two, Mariano is still behind with a 16-second gap. I can't quite believe it. But yeah, that is quite big.
So one thing I've noticed, we talked earlier about the hardware that everyone is using, sim racing hardware. Obviously, it's easier if you have a wheel, and it's even easier still if you have a really high-end wheel. I am following Santiago, who is driving with the keyboard, and he is remarkably smooth with the keyboard. Watching his front tires, the tires are in really good nick. He's smooth around the racetrack. He's in the racing line. You can see him kind of sawing at the wheel because you get this binary input of the steering wheel. But he's really smooth, whereas when I watch Mariano, who is driving with the wheel and is able to provide, much smoother, more consistent input, Santiago taking much better care of his tires, even though he has inferior equipment, and Mariano really driving the front tires of the car hard. So I think I think the current state of the race, the current order, a lot of it is, well, obviously it was down to bad luck by Mariano getting caught up in an incident earlier. But Santiago, his racecraft, just that much stronger today, being really mindful of where to position the race car, how fast he can drive into the corner, how much grip the tire will give him. He's doing a really, really strong job on kind of challenging equipment today. Well done to him.
Yeah, don't discount the fact that both Andy and Mariano are running around with a passenger on board, which does make the front end of the car a little bit more tricky to control, but not by that much. Okay, it's 70 kilograms extra, but in terms of driving style, it doesn't change your input too much. So very valid point there, Travis, and great to see Santiago just opening up this gap now, 1.5 seconds to his teammate.
Pete, remind me, do these cars have ABS?
No.
So another thing I noticed about Santiago, because he has keyboard input, again, binary inputs on or off, it's really tricky for him in these slow corners because all he has is brakes on or brakes off. So he is maximum braking and then just has to let off it and kind of. I've seen him pump the brakes a few times like ABS would do, though I don't think he's that fast. As both of these cars coming through a back marker there. It's one of the bank of Wayports cars gets well out of the way. I'm honestly stunned at how well he is managing the inputs because it's very difficult to do when you don't have, that kind of analog, smooth application of the inputs. This is really, really impressive by Santiago.
Yeah, it is impressive. I have tried to use keyboard in Live for Speed, and it's difficult. It's really difficult, and he's leading the race comfortably at the moment. 2 seconds now, the gap, as we watch Mariano again, who's 18.5 seconds now. Oh, sorry, 20 seconds now off the front, pretty much.
Yeah, Mariano not having the day he really would have liked. He closed down the gap just slightly on the previous lap, but not enough to make a big difference in the running order here. 20 seconds behind Andy in second place. Santiago just ever so slightly getting away from Andy. I do wonder, Andy he was able to stop much later, take on less fuel, though at this point, he and Santiago will have roughly the same amount of fuel on board. I wonder if Andy will have a run for the lead here or if they are happy running in this order.
Well, if the gap goes up, Santiago's certainly happy running in this order. Andy, not sure. We'll have to catch up with him in post, of course. But one driver who will not be happy with his current position in the race will be this man, Mariano. He is going to push with everything he has for the last 9 laps of this race to try and do anything he can to catch the 2 Vertex cars. It's going to happen. But yeah, it's just unfortunate that back marker issue really just. Well, that was Mariano's race, really.
Yeah, it really was unfortunate, but that's how it goes sometimes. Still fun for us to watch. He's working really hard at recovering. Don't know that it'll be enough today, bar some kind of incident, but he won't give up. Santiago still out there in the lead. Rear of the car gets away from him a little bit there. I think he didn't quite put enough throttle coming out of the corner there, though he did just set a personal best on the last lap at a 5:01. That might have been quicker than his qualifying time. We'd have to hearing that yes, indeed, that was faster than his qualifying time. So watching him go around, this is where you want to be, Pete. So sometimes you get off in the lead and it's easy to lose concentration. You want a little bit of action, a few back markers here and there, just to kind of keep you awake and remind you that you're in a race. As Santiago comes through to a yellow flag, I don't see anybody in the way there. But he's living the dream right now. He is in the lead. He's got clear racetrack, and he's just getting quicker and quicker. He has found the rhythm. He's found his zen. He is in the zone, and he's got to keep this up for 7 more laps to take a well-earned victory.
Yep, 7 laps to go. We briefly saw the qualifying results as yes, Andy does in fact fall further back, 3.2 seconds now the gap. So Santiago really is turning up the wick, as we say. Yeah, the gap between Mariano and Andy coming down, and the gap between Santiago and Andy going up. So, like you said, this rubber banding is coming into effect again.
Mm-hmm. And this is where he needs to be careful because you want to get into this rhythm where you're you're just hammering out really good laps. Like you feel really good. You've got the car under you. Like everything is comfortable. You're doing the same thing every lap. But now it's easy for him to push a little bit too much. You want to back off a little bit so that you're not driving like right on the ragged edge of the performance that you've adapted to. But you don't want to back off too much that you let your competitor, back on your bumper. Like he wants to keep this up, but he doesn't want to go over the edge. And so far, it looks like he's not doing that. I think he is right there where he needs to be. His attitude is perfect. Like he's smooth. He's looking really, really good.
Yeah, all of our front three are looking good in their own way, but it just depends where on the lap you're making up your time. You don't want to be losing time through arguably the most important corner on the track, the final corner, because of this huge straight. As we see Mariano, the gap between Andy and Mariano is still hovering around 20 seconds, so no gains really there, but story of today has to be the gap between the Vertex cars. 4 seconds now between Santiago and Andy. This is really, really promising from Santiago. Okay, he doesn't have that extra ballast, but it is what it is. He's driving well.
Yeah, he really is, and it may be that he finds a little extra ballast next week to even out a little bit. I don't know that there's a consistent rule to determine how they apply the ballast, but even so, fair play to him. Ballast aside, he's it may or may not be they don't have identical cars, but he's doing the work. He's driving a perfect race so far, and that's what really matters.
Yeah, only one incident that I can remember for Santiago on the first lap, and other than that, it's been pretty flawless so far. 5 laps to go for him, and with the fastest lap, that's an extra point in his pocket as well, if he can keep it till the end, which at this rate, it looks like he will, because he eked out another 4 tenths on that lap.
Looking back to Andy, Andy certainly isn't doing anything wrong. He's really smooth. His equipment appears to be in pretty good shape. I don't know that he has any damage. We can check that in a second. As far as I can tell, like he's following Santiago's line, to the inch around, every corner of this racetrack. But Santiago is just quicker. I think you mentioned this a minute ago, Pete. I think at this point the ballast is probably making enough of a difference, especially on the low fuel load, that Santiago is able to get away. Andy looks really good. It's just he doesn't have quite as much car beneath him as Santiago does.
Yeah, the ballast makes the car 7% heavier, so
yeah,
it's going to affect it, especially as all the weight's kind of in the middle towards the front of the car, and all the power's going to the front of the car, and around an entirely a track with basically entirely left-hand corners over the course of 40 laps, it's going to make a big difference.
Yep. And looking back to Mariano, obviously is the same ballast as Andy does. He's looks like he's struggling on his tires a little bit. If I recall, he repaired damage earlier. Is that true? He got punted
just took
pretty
fuel.
hard.
Just took fuel.
He just took fuel. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder then if the damage has made a difference in the performance of his car, because he took a pretty big punt. It's not clear. Yeah, it's not clear in the in the parameters that we can see on the car, but he took a hard hit and then didn't repair it, so that might account for his performance.
Yeah, possibly. It's interesting to watch these gaps, but Andy and Mariano essentially are running the same lap times there or thereabouts. It is, in fact, Santiago who is throwing down the gauntlet. It has to come down to this ballast, I think. It's just not worked out for these two. And as the way things are going, it will finish like this.
Yep. I'm looking at Ian now, who's got blue flags, because Santiago, leader of the race, has come up right behind him. Ian's going to move to the inside of the racetrack, well out of the way. Let Santiago through. Thank you very much. Off we go toward the start-finish line to finish this lap. There's a friendly honk from one of these drivers.
It'll be Santiago. He loves using that horn.
He does. Yeah, so Santiago will cross the line to start the 39th lap. Andy's still 4 seconds back. Yeah, Santiago now just counting off the laps. He can back off a little bit because he's got a pretty good buffer here. He's through the back marker. He doesn't have to worry about that. He just has to bring it home now, and he's got a blocker between him and his competitor. At this point, I don't know that Andy has anything for Santiago. I think we shouldn't. We say these kind of things, and then we curse the driver who's out in the lead, but it does look pretty good for Santiago at this point.
Yeah, he's got less than 2 laps to go. 1.5 laps at the sector time. The gap's still 4 seconds. Everything's going his way now. Yeah, Andy will not be disappointed to see a Vertex car winning. You would have loved for it to have been him, of course. But anything can happen still. Let's see what happens. Andy fueled less than Mariano and Santiago. He did pit later, so unless he adjusted his fuel load because of that, as Andy makes his way now past Ian, yeah, maybe some fuel issues potentially for Andy. I don't see it happening. We're on the final lap. If he'd have seen his fuel level too low, he would have come into the pits, done a splash and dash, and still probably been comfortably out ahead of Mariano. So Andy's staying out on track, almost 5 seconds now the gap, and we're going to watch Santiago, Travis, complete this race.
Yeah, Santiago not slowing down at all. He could afford to back off a little bit, but he hasn't. His previous lap was a 5:33, just 0.3 off his best lap. He's awfully quick. Coming over the crest and through the chicane one last time. A little bit ragged, as he came over the left-hander, but nice and clean through the right. He'll throw the anchor overboard through the final corner here, bring it out to the curb, and he can see the home stretch. Andy coming across the gantry right, coming under the gantry right now, and across the finish line to take a well-earned victory. Well done to him. Nice, consistent race, very quick. Didn't have the detriment of the ballast like his competitors did, but he drove a perfect race. Really, really strong out front once he inherited the lead. Andy crosses the line in second position, 4.68 seconds clear of Santiago. We were watching Mariano briefly, who'll be coming across the start-finish line in just a moment to take third position. These two teammates, 1-2 in the running here, stopping alongside in the first corner. Now seeing Mariano cross the line in third position. 28 seconds back of the leaders. Ian will be credited in fourth place, 1 lap behind. We wait for the remaining 2 cars on track to cross the finish line and round out the order. Ian coming through. Ian must have come across the line right before Santiago did. Ian coming around the back part of the circuit now. Wellington credited with 5th position, 2 laps back. And Arthur we will have across the finish line in just a moment. We can see him coming through this left-hand bend under the lights and across the finish line in 6th position. Pete, that will do it. A fairly uneventful race, but we got to see a clinic in the lead.
Yeah, a clinic in the lead, and from a driver who we'd almost written off after the first corner. Santiago was in the wall, involved in an issue lower down, but it is the Vertex team who take a 1-2 here at Aston Cadet for round 4 of Wayports Racing League Season 3 in Division 1. It is Santiago leading Andy, followed by Mariano for McLean Library. Ian for Lilium finishes P4. Wellington for Bank of Wayports P5. Arthur for Atrium in P6. And Alex for Step Up, not finishing the race, but classified there in P7, 26 laps off the lead. Importantly, as you mentioned in commentary, Travis, we did not see Valentina in this race. So this is big points gains for the Vertex team.
It really is. That will vault them to a very healthy lead in the championship standings. That'll sting a little bit for McLean Library. We might hear from Mariano later why Valentina was not present today. But regardless of the explanation, that's a disappointing points haul for them. They'll have some work to do to claw that gap back later in the season.
Indeed, and here you can see our extended podium. It's nice to see that down there. You've got the 2 Vertex cars, the McLean Library car of Mariano there on the right, and then Wellington and Ian 2. We're going to go away and prepare for some interviews. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just a moment's time. Welcome back to coverage of Wayports Racing League Season 3, Round 4 at Aston Cadet. We have some interviews for you. Travis, who do you want in first? Do we talk to our leader?
I think we should. That's a good idea.
Great. Well, Santiago for Vertex, your first win in Wayports Racing League Season 3. How do you feel about that?
Hey guys, I don't know what to say. I'm very happy. I'm very grateful to Andy because if it weren't for him, I would be in another position. So thanks to him, really. I really liked the race, although the first lap I was spinning my car. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, we pointed that out in commentary. We almost wrote you off, actually, because you were in the wall right at the start of the race, but you managed to turn it around. You managed to catch up to and overtake Andy on track, which was really impressive. Yeah, just a flawless drive. Talk us through the decision of the other two to run a passenger, the ballast. Do you think ultimately that helped you with your win today?
Yeah, of course. I think it's more balanced with that. How do you say? Handicap.
Right.
So it's like not a real win, but I don't
It's
know.
absolutely a real win. You absolutely won the race.
Yeah,
Cannot deny it.
100% a real win.
Yep.
That we talked about while you were off in the lead. We talked about how you were driving consistently and how it's easy when you're in the lead to kind of lose focus. But you kept pushing. You were out there. You were setting. We could see your best lap on the screen right now was a 5:01, which was faster than your qualifying time. I believe that was faster than the pole time.
It was.
And we remarked how you kept going quicker and quicker and didn't back off, but you kept it between the lines. We called it a clinic up front. Tell us what it was like to be there in the lead and just, being in the zone, in the rhythm for the last 20 odd laps of the race.
Well, like when I train alone, I feel very comfortable. So I think that the key was the gap between me and Andy. That I didn't see somebody in front of back from me, so I feel very comfortable. I try to play as careful as I can and just to play consistent.
Well, you did a very, very consistent job after
Yeah.
your wobble on the first lap. Yeah, did you think it was all over after that first lap incident, or were you still pushing, of course, to try and catch those front guys?
Well, at first I was like, oh man, I don't I don't know what to do. But then some people made a lot of mistakes. I really don't know what happened to Mariano, to be honest. I saw it on the chicane, and then I said, well.
Yeah, he
But
had a
so
number
many
of
times
issues.
I had a pole position and then screwed up, but it wasn't this time.
Yeah, we'll ask Mariano about this in just a minute. But to fill you in, he had a rather violent encounter with a back marker, and that compromised his race.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, congrats, Santiago, on your first win, and looking forward to the next round, round 5.
Of course.
Brilliant. Well, we'll hope to see you then, and hopefully you can carry this momentum into that race. I wonder if the Andy and Mariano will ask you to run a passenger for the next round. My advice would be don't. Anyway,
thank you both.
Best of luck. Cheers. Who should we talk to next? Should we talk to Andy?
Let's do.
Andy, P2 in the end, but it was your teammate who won. What are your thoughts? Andy's with us.
Yeah. Hello, I am. Yeah, what a nice race. It was very exciting, yeah. And I had a big fight with Mariano, and it could have go on for 40 laps, I think, until he was shot in the last turn. I'm very sorry for that because it destroyed our race, but it bring up a new competitor and was my teammate. Brilliant drive by him. Yeah, congrats, Santiago. There was nothing to do to keep you off from the podium, P1. So that was nice to see. And as I said, there was nothing to do for me. With the passenger, it was kind of even, but he had one fastest lap after another, so I couldn't hold him. Yeah, congrats again to Mariano again. Great comeback.
Yeah.
When you traded position for the lead, when Santiago went through, it wasn't entirely clear to us what happened, and now you're here, so we can ask you. Were you too deep on the brakes and just went off, and then chose not to fight it since you two are running 1-2? What happened there?
Yeah, I saw him closing the gap behind me, and I thought, okay, come on, just go to the edge and try everything. And then I saw him flying behind me, and then I saw his time. He did his perfect lap time with a 1:05.1, and I was so far away, and I just tried to avoid the risk of hitting him and let him through. So it was on purpose. I tried to follow him because I know he's better when he follows. So maybe it's better for me when I follow him. But he did a brilliant race in front of me. Great.
Yeah, and we talked about that too, how the two of you running at the front, really, really good points haul for Vertex, with the two of you finishing 1-2 on the podium. We speculated that you would run a smart race to make sure you secured the points, and it sounds like you did.
Yeah, it was not on purpose to do a 1-2 because Mariano had a beautiful pace all the week, and I expected him to be close in front of us. But yeah, as we saw in the race, it was very bad luck with that hit on the track, and I hope luck will be on his side again next week. I'm sure it will because it's Blackwood.
Yes, he does like Blackwood, doesn't he? Right. Well, yeah. So looking forward to next week. What do you think your chances are then of staying ahead of Mariano? I mean, yeah, you mentioned that Mariano does like Blackwood, but you're pretty handy around Blackwood too, Andy. Yeah, you're pretty quick there too.
Yeah, next week it's the case that I am not at home, and if I can race, if I can do the race, it won't be with the wheel. It will be with the keys. That makes me a second slower, and just in case there is internet connection, and if not, okay, I won't be there, but I will let you know. Yeah, and have a good race.
Yeah, well, your teammate is certainly very capable at using the keyboard, so maybe grab some tips off him if it does end up being that way. We hope to see you there next week because this week Valentina wasn't here, so good points for Vertex, but it could fall back into the McLean library their hands if you aren't there next week. So hopefully you can make it, Andy.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely, the McLean library is still there. It's still a threat, and we're in the middle of the season, so anything can happen. There's nothing decided yet. It's a very exciting season, and I'm looking forward to the next races, of course. Yeah, great job.
Thanks a lot. We'll see you then.
Yeah, see you soon, guys. Thanks. Bye.
Finally, I think we will have a word with Mariano himself. Mariano, what can I say? Absolutely terrible to see you in that incident with Alex at the beginning of the race. Give us your thoughts on round 4.
Yeah, I don't get it. Honestly, I'm still searching for answers. I'm massively disappointed. Obviously, I knew I had more pace than Andy. It was working. I was having a perfect race. The first time that you always expect back markers to give you a little trouble, but the first time that Alex cost me time on the track, Andy overtook, and then I managed to overtake Andy again. And then the second time, it was just a massive hit. It took me a while to get back. The gears were like stuck. The car was not going. It took me a while to get back to the track. It cost me a lot of time. And then the car never felt the same. I don't know if it was damage or just being so upset behind the wheel, but I couldn't get the same pace out of the car, and I was just waiting there for the end, basically.
Yeah, there was a marked drop off in your pace, so possibly damage related. You did come in the pits immediately. We expected maybe some damage repair, but that probably would have hampered your race worse than it did, and you could have been overtaken by Ian. But yeah, you stayed ahead of him. And we got to watch a masterclass by Santiago, who got past Andy and then ran away. So a new winner. That's got to be good to see in Wayports.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really happy for him. I just saw him in the interview waiting room, and I was telling him I'm really, really glad for him. Finally, it happened. There was always something holding him back, and this time he managed to do it. I guess no mistakes. We didn't talk that much, but I guess no mistakes on his part is always good to see. So hopefully we get more people on the front. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, no mistakes. Other than lap one, he got caught up in that incident, but then he drove a very consistent race. Travis was talking about this the whole race. Travis, yeah, consistency is king in Wayports Racing League. We normally see it from you, Mariano, but just not today, unfortunately.
Yeah, too bad. Well, I still got the lead in the championship, and yeah, it's all to play for, so that's good.
Yes. Brilliant. Looking forward to Blackwood. Andy, sorry, go ahead, Travis.
Oh, I was going to ask. I know Alex is a newcomer to the series, and learning the ropes with sim racing and kind of getting the hang of it. Is that will you go have a chat about that, or let bygones be bygones? Obviously, you're a little bit disappointed now, but these things happen; they come and go. I'm curious on your thoughts about Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we still keep a really friendly approach. The idea is that this is a community first, so we'll have a chat about it, and we already mentioned it, but we'll give more details as to what is expected especially when you see the race leaders coming. And you've seen Arthur, you've seen Wellington do that, maybe a little too much, but they're safety first. And yeah, we're gonna definitely have a friendly chat with Alex and talk about it.
Yeah,
fair enough.
That can't be sorted.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. Yeah, so looking forward to Blackwood. Andy seemed a little bit scared when we talked about Blackwood, considering your love of that track and your amount of experience there. But yeah, it should be a good race there at Blackwood.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. If we have a normal race where Andy doesn't put in an insane amount of practice, it should be a tight battle, and looking forward to it.
Well, Andy mentioned he might not even be able to attend, so it could be you versus the world.
Bring it on. That sounds good.
Brilliant. Well, we'll see you at... sorry, go on.
I was going to say, speaking of attendance, sorry, Pete, I have a final question for you. Mariano, Valentina not here today. Would you be around next week?
Yeah, she will.
That had big implications for the points this week.
Absolutely, yeah. We didn't want that to happen, but it does have to do with organizational changes that we're doing. Valentina's now in Europe. She just arrived this week, and she's moving countries and houses, and it's always difficult. So yeah, she couldn't be here today, but she's obviously going to be here in the next few races for sure.
Excellent.
Good to hear it. Yeah, you're going to need it to overthrow these Vertex cars. Brilliant talking to you again. We'll see you next week at Blackwood.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Very quickly, Travis, let's grab a word with Ian. Ian, P4, give us your thoughts.
Well, it was a pretty fun race. I didn't have significant battles, just a few back and forths, and with Santiago right in the beginning of the race. But yeah, it was a pretty cozy race. It was able to stand in that P4 for the most part of it. Yeah, pretty casual race actually.
Yeah, it must have been pretty encouraging to see when Mariano came out of the pits. You were pretty much on an even pace, having a nice battle with him. And it's kind of what could have been really if the beginning of your race had worked out the way maybe you'd wanted it to. Any comments on that?
Yeah. So when Mariano went out of the pits, I wanted to keep a longer battle with him, but I had so little fuel in the tank that I was able to go for maybe 2 or 3 laps battling with him, and I knew he had a faster pace. I don't know about his damage, what that crash caused in his car, but I knew he was faster anyway. So, but yeah, it was too bad that I couldn't keep a longer battle with him.
Well, that's always next week. Travis, any questions for Ian?
Yeah, Ian, we've talked about this in a few events, how you're consistently right there in 3rd or 4th position. A little bad luck here, small mistakes there. You could be further up the order. You feel like you've got a podium position, on the horizon? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, It really depends. I guess it really depends on the track. If we have like, I guess next week we're doing Blackwood, and that track is I'm a bit familiar with. Than the track today. In this track that we raced today, I didn't thought that I have a chance of podium, but maybe in a more familiar track like Blackwood, where we also have like more straight lines, because the this track today we have a bunch of non-straight lines, a bunch of chicanes and turns, and that's where you require the most skill in a race. So in a more straight track, I guess I can do better and yeah, get
Good.
maybe in a podium.
Cool. And next week, luck may come your way. Andy said he may not be here next week, and if he is, he won't be on keyboard. Valentina will be back, but the two of you are competitive. So I think next week it seems like you got a pretty good shot. You must feel pretty good going to a track you're comfortable on, and then having the circumstances kind of come your way.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Andy won't be missed.
Oh, fighting talk.
He can hear you.
So hey, Andy, you won't be missed.
I like it. Venomous banter. All right. Thanks, Ian. We'll see you
thank you.
Blackwood.
See ya.
Cheers. That was Ian from Lilium giving us a bit of a giggle. Yeah, Travis, give us your thoughts on this race and round 4.
That was a lot of fun for me. So I know, we look for the really close racing and excitement and kind of banging doors a little bit and trading positions, having these big packs running together, and that's a lot of fun to watch. I also, as much as I enjoy that kind of racing, I really enjoy seeing someone put a dominant performance in front of the race, and Santiago delivered that today. He got the lead. Andy made a little bit of a mistake, and then realized as he made it that he wasn't going to be able to keep Santiago behind, drove a smart race, and then Santiago delivered for more than half the race. Just perfect laps in front, carefully negotiating the back markers, just really just excellent driving by him at the front of the pack. That was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely, I would agree. And that rounds out round 4 of the championship. Next week, as we've been discussing, we are heading to Blackwood for round 5 of the championship, Blackwood Grand Prix, an old favourite of ours, at 1 o'clock UTC. That's when qualifying kicks off. Coverage here at 10 to 2 UTC. Thanks everyone for joining us. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, and we will see everybody next week. Have a good one.